Good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's last post ceremony. My name is Craig Burrell, and joining us today from the Royal Australian Air Force is Wing Commander Nicholas Porcina. This evening, we're honoured to acknowledge the Honourable Carlos Del Toro, Secretary of the Navy, United States, and Mrs. Betty Del Toro, and the accompanying delegation. We also warmly welcome Wing Commander Bob Howe, representing the Air Force Association. We welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that love and support them. We acknowledge the members of RSL and Services Clubs Association, RSL Victoria, and RSL Queensland, who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the pool of reflection by visitors to the memorial. If you are able, please stand and join in singing the national anthem. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn their loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit, in the hearts of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight, we will read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 102,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and on operations for more than a century. But first, we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths or floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the pool of reflection.
Today we remember and pay tribute to Flying Officer Graham Fryer, who was killed during the Second World War. Graham Fryer was born in the Sydney suburb of Rose Bay on the 9th of May 1919, the son of Alfred and Margaret Fryer. Growing up, he had three brothers, Richard, Charles and Keith, and a sister, Emily. Their father was the manager of the Cootamundra branch of the Bank of New South Wales. In 1931, 4 days before Graham's 12th birthday, his father passed away, leaving his wife to care for the children. Graham attended Dulwich Hill Commercial School and was a keen cricketer for Wenty Juniors, scoring 2 centuries in the 1936 season. After leaving school, he worked as an audit clerk. Having served for 15 months as a sergeant in the militia with the Australian Army Pay Corps, Fryer enlisted in the Royal Australian Air Force on the 9th of November 1941, aged 22. He was trained as a pilot and in December 1942 had received his wings and been made sergeant. Fryer embarked for overseas service from Melbourne on the 25th of January 1943, arriving in the United Kingdom in February. As part of the Empire Air Training Scheme, he was one of almost 27,000 RAAF pilots, navigators, wireless operators, air gunners and engineers who joined Australian and British squadrons in Britain throughout the course of the war. Further specialist training followed in England, and in June 1943, Fryer was promoted to Flight Sergeant. That October, he was commissioned as a pilot officer, and on the 19th of December 1943, he was posted to number 463 Squadron, RAAF. As part of Bomber Command, the squadron flew the 4-engined Avro Lancaster heavy bomber. On the night of the 3rd of May 1944, Bomber Command launched a major raid on the military camp at Mailly-le-Camp in France. Graham Fryer, now a flying officer, was the pilot of Lancaster ULT-2. He took off from the Royal Air Force Base at RAF Waddington that evening. The raid was successful in destroying the ammunition stores and the trenches at the Mailly camp. Of the 17 aircraft that number 463 Squadron committed to the mission, 5 failed to return, including Fryer's Lancaster. It was shot down soon after bombing the target, crashing into the ground at Marigny-le-Grand in the early hours of the 4th of May. There were no survivors. Those killed in the crash with Flying Officer Graham Fryer were fellow Australian Flying Officer Henry Williams and British Airmen, Flight Sergeants Edwin Stone, John Ward and Joseph Healy, and Sergeants Robert Gracie and Kenneth Owen. After the war, the remains of Commonwealth servicemen buried in Europe were examined and identified where possible. The bodies of Fryer's crew could not be identified and were buried in a communal group of graves in the Pavra civilian cemetery, some 3 miles west of the crash site. Fryer's remains rest there under the inscription, "His duty fiercely and nobly done, ever remembered." Graham Fryer was 24 years old. He left behind a fiancée, Beryl Luckman, and a family that deeply mourned his loss. All 3 of his brothers also enlisted in the Second World War. Charles served with the RAAF, while Keith and Richard served with the 2nd Australian Imperial Force. Flying Officer Graham Fryer's name is listed on the Roll of Honour on my left, along with almost 40,000 Australians who died while serving in the Second World War. This is but one of the many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Flying Officer Graham Fryer, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in the hope of a better world.
Please stand for the reading of the Ode and the sounding of the last post.
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them. Lest we forget.
Lest we forget. We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Poziere or in the low scrub at Gallipoli, with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain, has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes the last post ceremony. On behalf of the Director and staff, we thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial today and for your continued support during the Memorial's development project. We wish you all a very pleasant evening.